Hi, I'm Ashley, and I'm going to show you guys how to build an attribute table for a floating point type raster. So we're going to go ahead and use that group one underscore fog data raster file from our geodatabase. We can bring the references up here. So it's the fog data for the Bay Area. And when we right click this and we check its properties, we can look and see that its pixel type is floating point, and that actually prevents us from building that raster attribute table. So when I right click and says open attribute table, it's all grayed out, which is a problem because we want to actually assign discrete values to those pixels. So we're going to go ahead and first save the significant digits with the raster calculator tool. So we want to keep all these decimal places. So we want that 0.85, that could be really important to us, and the 0.13. So we're going to go ahead and use the raster calculator tool to do that. So this is a box, but it's just really fast to search it. So we're going to take that group one fog data, and then we're going to multiply it by 100. And that is going to essentially move that decimal place over for us so we can save those significant digits. So we can go ahead and rename this fog data x100 to signify that it's 100 times the actual values. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And now we have another raster data set. But this time, if you look at the table of contents, you can see that those values are literally 100 times higher. But now we have way more significant digits on the left side of that decimal point, which means that they will be preserved when we use the integer tool later. So next, we're going to go ahead and use the integer tool, like I mentioned. And what's great about the int tool is that it converts these pixel types to integer from the floating point. And it assigns the closest whole number as the value. So 14.13 is going to just be 1413 whole. If we just use this int tool on the original feature class, it would just say 14. We're going to put in our new layer. We're going to save this as int fog data x100. So it's the integer version of it. And it's saved in our geodatabase. We're going to hit OK. And once again, it looks exactly the same. But in comparison, when we right click, there's no attribute table. But now that we used the integer thing, we have an attribute table, and it tells us how many cells have each of these whole values. And if you want to get back to the original values again, you can totally just use the calculate raster tool again, and you can divide it by 100 and you'll be back to the original values. Also, sometimes in certain circumstances, according to Esri, when you use the integer tool, it won't always create an attribute table as a result. So optional, if that doesn't work for you, you can use the build raster attribute table tool. Oops. Build as a B. And so when we click on this, you can just input that layer, and we would click overwrite since it already has an attribute table, and you can run that, and that should generate your attribute table for it. And then it will go ahead and build it into that same already existing layer. But we already have one, so we don't really need to do this. All right, and that is how you give a floating point type raster attribute table.